بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام را. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص.
All right, we are pleased to have with us an actual descendant of Dr. Talib Karim Muhammad, and that is his son, who I think may be the eldest son, but I'm not sure. But I know for sure that he's the one who resembles Dr. Talib Karim Muhammad the most. In fact, oftentimes some of my relatives look at him and they are freaking out because they're like, what is this? You know, a reincarnation of some sorts. But this is none other than Andre Manuel, and we're here in LA. And I'll tell a story about my experience with Andre. So Andre and his mother and my father met long before we, his children were born. And so we didn't know about Andre until later in our lives. I must have been about 14 or 15. And when Andre, I believe, came to Detroit once, right? If I'm not mistaken, or did we come? No, I know we came to LA. We came to LA in 1985, in fact. And that's when we initially met Andre out here in our trip to visit Aunt Gert. And it was a great experience because Andre at that time was a leader of the hip-hop music industry. He was one of the early producers of hip-hop music, involved with some of the acts such as Eazy-E and Ice-T and Dr. Dre and Yella and the world-class Wrecking Crew. And I got exposed to this as a 14, 15-year-old when a lot of my buddies back in Detroit had just began to hear about it. And so I was able to have significant cred because I could say not only did I know about it, but my brother was a producer for all these people that they were talking about. So it was a great honor to have met. He never knew this story, but it was a great honor to have met him literally because he made me cool in the eyes of my peers. And so I'm gratified to that for that big brother. Always I'm gratified. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, and then I'm gonna double down because fast forward, after I graduated from high school, I went to the Air Force Academy, and that's when he was props at his peak of this business career. He was the CEO of a music distribution company, and this company was actually moving, thousands and thousands of units. And he can probably talk a little bit about that at that time. And he had an act that was a very famous act that even people like ourselves who were I was Colorado at that time, but in Detroit knew about. So it was then, and I came to visit him at this time, and kind of being able to go around with him in some of the places that he was frequenting, and seeing the people that he knew. It was again a second honor and privilege to be again with my big brother and see the cars and a nice place that he had. So these are the types of memories that most stand out to me. And so I know we're here to talk about our father, but I could not help but think about, again, my early impression of you and how impressed I have always been. And so, again, I really want to thank Allah for blessing me, because, I grew up without having in my house a big brother, but to have you as a big brother who I came to know and came to respect and admire, has meant a lot to me over my lifetime. And I just really want you to know, since I've never told you this, exactly how much it meant and how much you mean to me.
Oh wow. I don't even. Well, thank you, thank you. That's much. As the young people say, you extra right now, because that's more. That's a lot. I feel I'm what they say. I'm not worthy, and you know what? As far as I was concerned, I grew up an only child. Right? It wasn't. I was 26 when I found out about like all of these brothers and sisters I had. So my mom and father met in Detroit, and our dad had just gotten out of the service, I believe. It just gotten out of the Air Force, and their aunt, our aunt, Vernita, was my mom, one of my mom's best friends, and she introduced my dad to me, right, and my mom, and I want to say my mom was about 19. I don't know exactly how old Dad was at that time, but it wasn't long after, maybe a year or so, that I was born, and they weren't together. They weren't like together for too long, right? They were for whatever reason, like it just kind of. You know how we do sometimes. We don't tell the young people all of their history things. It's like, you just don't find out, and, they separated. And so I wasn't around my dad. So I grew up in Detroit and until I was 17. And then I came out here. I decided, because my mom was out here, that her and my uncle had moved out to work in the aerospace industry. They moved out to California. And my grandmother raised me back in Detroit, right? So, I've got all of these relatives from the father's side of the family, never met, never set eyes on. No grandma from that side, no nothing. Don't ask me why. So, you flash forward about, I don't know, however many years. I'm 26. I get a call one day. It's my mom. She says, hey, a relative of your dad says that your dad is coming to California. Do you want to meet him, right? This would be the first meeting that I would ever have. And I said, yeah, of course. I have questions, right? And so I went to meet him at the airport, and we met. And I believe I picked him up at the airport, and he went straight to a mosque where he's giving a talk. I forgot what number it was, but we spent some time together, and he said, listen, I'm only going to be here a couple of days, and we talked, and I knew he was a Muslim at that time, before I met him, actually, and we exchanged political views. I grew up a Christian. We talked politics. We talked, religion, this, that, and the other. And he said, I'm gonna be coming back. And I don't know exactly. Maybe it might have been a year. I don't exactly remember. I was 26, and I don't even think it was a whole year. And he gave me a call one day and said, hey, I'm here. I want you to come meet the family. And I show up, and he said, come meet your brothers and sisters. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe one or two. And I walk in, and it's like it was a small baseball team there. I was like, word? I have this. And they were like stair steps, right? And this kid, of course, was the oldest one, and I'm like, he was about the only one that was old enough to take around any of this madness that he's telling you that we were doing at this time, because really, if you Wikipedia me, it'll tell you I'm probably responsible for this rap thing as it has developed now. It wasn't supposed to go all this way, but it went this way. So if you Google or Wikipedia, so I'm like, okay, let me take this young man around and show him as much as I can without our father going, what have you done to my children? And we hung out, we met. I got pictures of him and some of the acts we were with, and it was just really gratifying to, I spent more time, he was always really busy. He was going places, and it seemed like his time, like he was always busy. Yeah, our father. It was just like time was, he was like, when he came, I think he came to town to help out a relative to right, to paint her house, right, and it was in Los Angeles, and that's what they were busy doing in between his other responsibilities, and but he would cut out a little time for me to sit down and find out what I was doing, and I spent most of the time just really bonding with the siblings, and I, as he says, I just really feel blessed to have somehow inherited a family that I did not have, because again, I grew up all like, oh, it's just me, it's just me, and my recollections of my father were, when I think about how much from that point 26, I was like, I need to know I didn't get to spend enough time with him when he was here, so I'm the type of person, I'll do a deep dive. So I started diving and diving and diving. I'm back to, where was it, Oklahoma? Was it Oklahoma? I'm back to what he started in Oklahoma and what he did here, and the mosques and the restaurants and this, and so I'm like all in this man's life to see exactly what he did. And he didn't come to California, I don't believe. Did he come back to Cali after?
So I mean, you would probably know better than me, but I do know that, again, we were there in 1985 when family vacation to California took place. But, the one thing that kind of strikes me as being a question I'm curious about is you as, kind of a 26-year-old, oftentimes, even when I was 16, I thought I knew it all. Wow. So, you as a 26-year-old music executive at the time as well, I mean, what, major impression that you had of your father, of our father, what, if anything, did you see in him also being in you? Did you kind of see something and say, oh, okay, that's the reason why I'm this way or this way? I mean, clearly you guys, I don't know if you noticed when you first saw him, but you had such a strong resemblance. I mean, what was that stood out to you?
I would say, like I said, when he came, I picked him up at the airport, and I'm looking for people that I didn't know what he looked like, right? I hadn't seen a picture. I'm 26 years old. I don't have a picture of my dad. And when he walked off the plane, I was like, I don't even want to say what I thought. I was like, wow, like there's a shorter me walking toward me, right? And he had on the kufi, and he was analytical. I would say that trait in me maybe I got from him. He was very much analytical and truly purposed about what he was doing in life. I was moving so much at that time in business because, as he said, hip-hop and business was so new. I was from one coast to the other on tour all the time, and it's like the South had not exploded with hip-hop yet, right? So it was like when we came through the South, we were on tour. So I didn't get to come through and just really intertwine and mix into the rest of the family and get to be around them all the time when you guys were growing up as much as I would like to. But hey, for what time is left, we try to do that now. So that's what I would say.
So let me ask you also two questions, and I'll conclude with this. One, if there was one lesson that you could take away from our father's life, what would you say is the one major lesson that you gleaned from his life?
That's a tough question to be honest. It, the one thing I would say, that one sentence that my father said to me, there was like, well, what do you think? It was one of those, what do you think about this? And what do you think about, what do you think about this over here? And truly, one side of it was not real. It was just about how certain people were acting, right? And he said, what is, what ain't, fill in the blank. And I would say that that's a lesson that it stuck in my head, and it was kind of like, don't waste your time on things that are really not relevant, and don't let the bad habits of others come into your life. But through association, osmosis, call it what you want, because we tend to absorb good and bad from other people. Not that other people are bad, but other people have bad habits, and I have bad habits. I'm sure you have bad habits. Everyone has bad habits. But if you absorb their thing, then it lessens you. And I got that from him in that conversation.
A lot of people have drawn parallels between some of the consciousness that existed of that time. Even, the West Coast rappers, which, and the scale in terms of hip-hop equilibrium, people would say was on the opposite side of, consciousness.
100.
But there were some very deep threads of consciousness, even amongst West Coast rappers. Mm-hmm. And some, and again, I've never heard this definitively, but you're one of the godfathers, so you would know, is what do you believe were the connections or influences that you and other producers and writers and artists had, that you could see were either directly or indirectly related to the Muslim experience that, of course, even like it was impacting you, even though you were not raised as Muslim, mm-hmm. but you had relatives who were Muslim. Were there other examples of other artists who you think might have also been impacted and how that influenced their music?
You know what? We were. If you would look at rock and roll, I often say there was. You probably, like, for those of you that are older, there was, from a comedic standpoint, there was Pigmeat Markham, there was Mom's Mabley, there was Red Fox, there was Flip Wilson. Our hip hop, or early hip hop, was very much street influenced, and it was more of a street reporter. Like, before there was widespread crack epidemic, we were screaming about dope man, and what was going on in the streets and the violence and, F the police and this type of thing, that it hadn't reached like nationwide consciousness about, on a media standpoint, in the music. There's certain things you couldn't speak about weed in music. You couldn't speak about sex as graphically as you can now. So we were way over there to the left. We pretty much invented the parental guidance sticker about this. Ours was one of the first stickered records ever, right? That you had to go, because what we were saying was it was too real, and it was young bravado as well. So we're talking about money and and drugs and what's going on the street. The way that our music has progressed right now, like what we were doing was meant to be heard in the basement, behind closed doors, like your mama and daddy should never, ever, ever, forever, ever, for never hear you listening to this music, right? That was that like wide, like Red Fox. You know, Red Fox couldn't be on the TV.
Almost like Dolomite.
Exactly,
right?
But the Dolomite of hip hop,
right?
Now Chuck D was talking that like nation building and black struggle and black nationalism, and X-Clan was talking that.
KRS-One.
And KRS-One on the West Coast, you had Paris, you had like the all Muslim, you know, and that was like great, because we looked at that like, okay, our tiny little speck of this is not going to dilute that great message. But little did I know that, you know, it only takes a little bit to poison the entire system. Because while, like, there was a certain point where people were wearing black, red, and green medallions with African symbols on them again. And when we played New York, we got booed. We got booed off stage because the young people in New York were like, you know, this is Harlem, and we ain't having that like gangster stuff. And I'm like, okay, good. That's great. We still selling like 1 million records. We happy, right? In no time, I really attribute this to the marketing and promotion arm of just Wall Street. It's like where you point the money at. I don't know what insidious nature, but instead of that blowing up, instead of the Chuck D, yeah, Public Enemy blew up, but instead of that wave taking over, the gangsters took over. It just got blown out of proportion. You got some young people talking about some real stuff, and now all of a sudden, it is in vogue to be a gangster. We would talk about gangsterism like the full thing, like you start here, you end up in prison, you get killed, you know, your mama's getting shot up, this is that type of stuff, and it was real. But all of a sudden, tens of millions of dollars and $1 billion glamorized this. The Muslim and the black nationalist folks that was trying to make something happen that was positive and push us, and they came so very close, they got swallowed up. So, you know, that's kind of like how I felt about it. But still, like those guys that I'm talking about, and there was several. I mean, I could go on with a lot. Even guys like Tribe, and you know, a lot of, like you say, a lot of East Coast acts. Not as many West Coast acts that was on that, because I think the gangster had just taken over so hard. You know, it just spread like a virus. And look at where we are today with rap music. I mean, there is no ceiling to how ridiculous we have gotten.
As I began looking at this, it appeared to me that it wasn't by mistake. You mentioned a little bit about Wall Street's, you know, subtle interference and pointing money and green lighting projects that they wanted to see promoted in our community, right? Mm-hmm. It seems to me, I'll take it even further, that, you know, literally the people who wanted to see the destruction of other human beings, literally, you know, and we talk about, you know, Congresswoman Maxine Waters exposed, as you might know, with the San Jose Mercury News, how at that time in the 1990s and late 1980s, there was a big cover-up in which President George H. Walker Bush and in fact even before him, President Reagan were involved in the Iran-Contra trade, where they pushed crack cocaine literally into our communities as a way of funding their wars in South America. And this is documented in the Congresswoman, you know, and I know you know of people who know that story even better. So literally it appears to me that people were rejoicing off of our destruction. And I'm going to even break it out of the racial context, because I don't think it's just a racial issue. I think that there are people who are the wealthy elites who want to see destruction of other human beings, spiritually destruction first and foremost, and then physical destruction. And they use actively music, and there's an influence in the context of organized crime and that, and they use guns, and they use drugs, all in the same purpose. And again, I'm not, I'm coming at it from a context of, yes, I am a Muslim, but also just an observer, particularly, a businessman and a lawyer who's been involved with advising artists. So as someone who is an artist, someone who is a businessman also, but, who's not necessarily a Muslim, it seems to me that, do you see the same thing I'm seeing, is my question.
Capitalism doesn't care who or what you are. Capitalism doesn't care whether you're Muslim, Baptist, Hindu, Indian. It doesn't care what you are. You have individuals and governments that have capitalistic intent. And the purpose of capitalism is to enlarge itself, and by whatever means necessary, enlarge itself. So the cocaine found gangs and weaponized them to distribute its product. It's a simple business transaction. Now, you'll hear many people say, as long as it was in our neighborhoods, nobody really gave a damn. That's them over there, and we're bringing this cocaine. But there was a lot of, there was a lot of poor brown people and poor white people, because, white people, poor black people, poor brown people, poor people of any race or nationality, they have issues that they tend to want to self-medicate from. We tend to focus on the symptom, which is what that is, rather than the problem, which is oppression and capitalism that is really a caste system in America. No matter where, this country will always need an oppressed people, whether you're new Irish or you're new Italian or you're new black, you're new Pakistani, you're new Vietnamese or whatever.
It seems to me clearly, and this comes from some of the teaching the early Muslim Americans here, that this racism, for example, and the extreme selfishness which leads to the type of homelessness that you have out here on these streets today, then all of these are nothing more than the manifestations of the devil. And so, there's some people who are misguided to say, okay, well then that must mean that all these people are the devil themselves. And again, we're not saying that, but it's evil. I mean, there's no other way of explaining it. How can you, again, allow, such a concentration of wealth where, people can drive around in the most expensive cars and live in the most expensive of homes, and have people literally outside their doorsteps, around the corner from their houses, living on the streets? What do you see in conclusion? You being out here and you see all this, you're living in it. What is the takeaway that you have, and what do you see in the future?
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with you that the rich enjoy the poverty and the suffering of the poor. They benefit from it. So, it's semantics. Like, are they sitting around and going, oh, look at those poor people, oh, they're... No, but do they manipulate the classes and the races and all of this so that they can hold on to that wealth? Yes, they do. But that's capitalism. I don't know. Is it evil to be that greedy? Yes, it is evil to be that greedy.
Like when we first met. It's an honor to have met you, and it's an honor to continue to learn from you. And I thank Allah for everything that we have gained from you, and I ask Allah to be with you. Of course, I want to express my condolences on the life that you have lost in terms of your wife, a beautiful, beautiful woman who I remember and cherish so greatly. But her life and the passing of her life is nothing but a demonstration of what we said, that everything is in the hands of the Almighty, and we never know when the last of our days will be here. But I do want you to know that we appreciate you, and I'm glad that we've had this chance to talk together tonight.
All right, man. Thank you very much. And to all my brothers and sisters out there, I treasure our relationship, and I feel as though all of and to let you know, all of my brothers and sisters are very much smarter than I.
No, that's not true.
Especially this one over here.
That's not
hey,
true.
Dad raised some high education people here, and I've taken in a lot from them, and it's just been a joy to watch them grow and prosper and be what I'm sure that both our dad and their mom would be proud of. And I thank you for the time of being here, and even for my sisters that I haven't met personally, I look forward to you. Hopefully you get to see this, and God bless you all.
Peace.
عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت 11 كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين. قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين. وكذلك يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث ويتم نعمته عليك وعلى آل يعقوب